Hi, I'm Kristen Mulholland. I'm with IEG, and I'm here at World Bank headquarters in Washington, D.C., following a very in-depth panel discussion about the future of higher education in the context of a rapidly changing global economy. With me today is Roberta Malee Bassett. She's a senior higher education specialist with the World Bank Group. It's an honor to have you today at our conversation.
It was my pleasure.
And one of the more striking facts that I came across today in the context of our conversation was that while access to higher education has increased dramatically worldwide, the quality of higher education as it's provided by different institutions around the world has actually not been consistent. And I'm just very curious, what in your position do you do to try to ascertain the relative quality of different higher education programs and institutions around the world?
Thank you very much. The World Bank Group approaches quality assurance in higher education in multiple ways. When we are designing projects with our clients and they're asking for support for quality assurance in higher education, we actually approach this by looking at their systems as a whole. Do they have a quality assurance agency? Do they have structures for evaluating institutions both internally and externally? And then we support the development of those systems where they do not exist, including the training of local staff to be able to do quality assurance as a profession or as sort of the side profession for faculty at the institutions. We give support to governments to think about the indicators they can use to evaluate the quality of institutions. Progression rates of students, dropout rates, graduation rates are some of the best that we have, but they also can be challenging to measure because you can manipulate those kinds of data and indicators by grade inflation and progressing students who may not be prepared. So we always see the positive and negative of assigning certain indicators to measure these things, but those do exist. There is a movement now towards learning outcome evaluations to try to assess if the quality of the education is actually leaning towards something. But this is a very nascent area of evaluation for quality, and so it remains to be seen if that's going to be something that becomes universalized around developing world in particular.
There was an interesting point made that globalization is increasing the temptation to use, for example, rankings as a way to assess quality of institutions, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts about that.
Yes. Well, I was very negative in the panel about rankings, and I do find them quite troublesome, actually, in that they are taken in isolation from the methodologies and the metrics used to create the rankings. So there is a problem when you hierarchically rank universities around the world that creates a real sense that there's a difference between 1 and 2 or 1 and 10 or 1 and 100 without knowing what those metrics are and how they're weighted or how much those weights relate to what you believe is important for quality of higher education. The rankings stand in isolation and present something that's much more absolute than they actually are in terms of really what you access and get from that education at those institutions. And then, moreover, rankings tend to isolate universities that don't publish or teach in English. They tend to be very heavily skewed towards science and research institutions, towards highly selective institutions. I mean, the metrics for excellence tend to be in these very selective areas, but it doesn't capture the diversity of education, higher education, and all that is done in higher education to support students and society.
You had an interesting sort of exception for the value-added indicator. I'm really interested to know about a little bit more about that.
Yes. Value-added is a concept that's actually relatively new in the rankings environment, and Salvador Alvarez, who was here from the Ministry of Education in Mexico, discussed a bit about that they are trying to do more of this at their universities, and the universities themselves are designing these tools to look at the quality of the students on entry and how much they change and grow during the course of their university or tertiary education. At some schools that have highly selective admission, you would actually expect to find quite little in terms of real growth in what they're capable of doing because they're already highly capable on entry. But value added actually shows students who have arrived with sort of maybe a mixed skill set, but the institution has done an extraordinary job to build up their skills and graduate at a very high level. Those schools deserve accolades and appreciation for that kind of mission-driven work that isn't captured in rankings that really look at science, research, and excellence in that way. So value added, we're hoping, is going to be something that is used more and more.
So what is the World Bank Group doing in the realm of higher education to help countries as they make these shifts and try to adapt how they measure success?
Yeah.
And what do you wish they could do more of?
That's an excellent question. Well, the World Bank's work on higher education is client-driven. So the client will come to the World Bank and say, we have a problem with higher education. Can you help us with quality assurance? Can you help us with finance? Can you help us with governance? Those are the three big areas. And we design projects to support those reforms. Something I would like to see more is work on equity. And the challenge on equity often is we go to some countries that believe that equity is already codified in their systems. So there's nothing that needs to be done. It may be that we're not capturing the diversity that we expect, but it's constitutionally protected. Everyone is equal, so there's nothing that needs to happen. And we know that's not true. So it would be nice in more of our projects to be able to include more equity considerations. But again, that's very much on the clients as well. It needs to come from them. This is important to them. We can support the arguments that help them get there, but it isn't necessarily our place to say you must have these things. So it is collegial and hopefully educational that we get there together, but it's not something that happens as much as I would like.
Well, Roberta, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciated your insights and your addition to the conversation.
Thank you very much.